Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today it's back into the Big Daddy Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. Now I had been recording my setup, and the last I left you, we were moving up the U.S. West Coast. What I found is that when I record the setup, it takes me about twice as long as it does normally, because you may not know this, but I have a tendency to go on about my thoughts. So it it sometimes takes a little longer than I was expecting, and I feel a little bad because I got to get this turn back to Lodric and get this game going, the devious Lodric, um, and get this game going, which is the fun part, right? You see what happens, and we can talk about different areas of the map as the game goes on. If you want to know how to set up the damn game, you can go, and it is a monster to set up. Now, I absolutely love it. I know other people love it. Maybe you'll love it. It's a lot of micromanagement. I get that, and as the allied player, you have over 5,000 different units to contemplate moving or setting up on turn one. After that, it lessens quite a bit because ultimately you're going to have, or at least the way I like to do it, nodes where things happen. And so you can go to those nodes and, give orders to a few things, but things will be moving around and you don't have to give them orders every turn. You can put them on continuous supply. You can, a lot of your big capital ships early on, you're not going to be moving or doing anything with. So what I was going to say is if you want to know more about the setup and how to set it up, go to my original Let's Play of this game, and we go through every single portion of this map. And we go down a spreadsheet that you can get on the Matrix forums called the Cole spreadsheet. And Cole has gone through and very handily put together the spreadsheet of where, at least in his opinion, you should send every single unit in the game on turn one, or how you should set them up, every base, what you should do when it comes to reinforcements, resupply, pilot training, you name it. He's covered it on that spreadsheet. So if you're very interested, look over his spreadsheet, or I go through the spreadsheet in my original Let's Play. So I just thought, I'm not going to do that this time. We gotten into 4 episodes of it, and I was just moving up the U.S. West Coast. And it just didn't seem very productive to me when I've got a whole nother set of videos that show you how to set up the game. Now, I do a few things differently than Cole. I would say 90% of what he does, I think, again, it's his opinion. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying I do things a little differently. It's how I'm in 10% of the cases. In 90%, I pretty much do exactly what's on his spreadsheet, although I don't really use the spreadsheet anymore when I play the game. I've just played it enough. I know where I want certain things to go. Um, but I just wanted to do kind of an overview and show you where we are. Now, I had done all of Canada, the East Coast, theater box. I had done the Panama theater box. We had kind of gone through San Diego and LA. I was up to San Francisco. Now, if you look at San Francisco and you want to look at I've set up all of these task forces. Um, that's how many of them there are. There's 3 pages of task forces that I've done here. Just some kind of the highlights. I like to aggregate most of my infantry at the big important spots. Now I will leave some out at Fort Ord or whatnot, but usually, I want infantry that's going to stay in San Francisco to get to San Francisco. I pull it out of these back bases. Now I may leave a base force in certain places, but most of it I try to move out to the coast. I try to cover every coastal base with some infantry if I can, and so there will be a lot of infantry moving out here, there, and everywhere. Now, I've decided in this game, and that's usually how I do it, is any infantry that's going to go out to the Pacific, infantry or artillery or motorized, any troops or fighting units, let's put it that way, combat units, I try to put down in Los Angeles and ship them out of Los Angeles. I try to do most of my freight or supply and fuel out of San Francisco. That way I just know where it's going. I mean, you could do half and half, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying how I keep it straight in my mind. And so I try to move most of my transports down to LA, most of my cargo and tankers up to San Francisco, except in the first turn, you're going to have tankers in LA that you want to get filled up immediately. Anything with an endurance over 13,000 nautical miles, I try to send to Australia if I can, if it makes sense. Anything less than that, I almost always go to Pearl Harbor with it. And then I set, so, I've got San Fran and LA and Seattle, Vancouver. Those are your four main spots on the West Coast. Anything under 12,000 nautical miles or under, I bring to Pearl Harbor. Anything, let's say 13,000 or over, I try to take south and then across to Australia. And how do those lines work? Well, if we can't zoom out here. This is an older game, but the basic idea is you have this fence that goes from Pearl Harbor to Christmas Island to Pago Pago. So it curves around. It's like a crescent, the Iron Crescent, Pago, Suva, Nomaya, and then into either Brisbane or Sydney. That's your kind of initial line is anywhere south of that line is one cargo lane, right? And you can protect that cargo lane with destroyers coming out of Suva and Pago looking for subs. You can also do it with aircraft coming out of there. Nomaya, you can get aircraft coming out of there. So the way I set up the game, and I've already set up all of these islands, you can see the task force is ready to go, is Nomaya. I also put something up in Comac, and I will also put something up in Luganville, including planes up in Luganville eventually, and a base force out at Afate. So you kind of got a triangle here where you can put planes. I also bring the big U.S. base forces that have 30 aviation support. I put them in Nomaya and Luganville. I put them in Suva and Pago. So those are my main ones. Nomaya, Luganville, Suva, Pago, and then around the corner. Now, this is a long ways for the Japanese to go, right? I like to go through this corridor or through this corridor generally. Then I have a backup corridor that's south of Tahiti. If you start getting pressed in, one of these two corridors, there's a third one that I have go south of the Marquesas Islands, south of Tahiti, and around. And a lot of times the ones with big endurance, I'll do that way just to be a little safer. And sometimes the ones with shorter endurance, we have go through Auckland. They can refuel tactically. I do it minimal or tactically through Auckland and then up into Australia, whether that be Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane, which are the three main Australian ports. You can go right up into there. And so everything on the West Coast is either going to Pearl Harbor, with just a few exceptions. And even San Diego has some tankers and cargo at the start, and you get them going. Then when they come back, you set them up on continuous supply. But everything from San Diego, LA, San Francisco, and then as we move up the coast, really Seattle, Vancouver. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it becomes 4 because you kind of forget about San Diego doing that. And it's these main 4 nodes where everything I have is that being their home port after they've made their initial delivery. So the way to set that up, we'll go to San Francisco very quickly and I'll just randomly pick something. Let's see what we got here. Uh, these are AOs, okay? They are oilers. Eventually, they will be used to refuel ships that are at sea. That's what they're for. They're floating gas stations, essentially. Um, you can see the endurance is only 10,000. I have them going straight out to Pearl Harbor. I have their home port set at San Francisco. So they'll go out there, they'll come back. Now, I do not have that set on continuous supply. The reason being is AOs will not be doing this till the end of the game. Eventually, we will have them go out to strategic locations like Tahiti, like Christmas Island, like Suva, like other places like that where they can run out and refuel ships if needed. Okay. This is another AO. This AO is 11800. You can see I'm actually sending that to Tahiti. I like to have Tahiti as a nice refueling base, and I will back that up. I'll have destroyers down there. I'll have aircraft down there. Um, and we'll make sure we protect that really well. And because of that, this AO carries almost 15,000 tons of fuel. You only have to run that down there one time, and Tahiti will be refueled for all of 1942, essentially. And then it'll come back to San Fran. Then we'll send it out to a strategic location. Hell, maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll send it back to Tahiti and have it sit there in port with its 15,000 in fuel so that if we need to run out to something that needs fuel, we can do it. I've got a lot of destroyers here. Now, the Humphreys, okay, so let's talk about destroyers very quickly. See that really low endurance, 4625? That means I'm going to keep it on the West Coast. Destroyers with endurance 6,000 or better, I will send out to Pearl Harbor initially and then distribute them in and around the different islands I want to protect. Anything under that, like the Humphreys 4625 we see here, and as you look, that's got 100% of the fuel that it can carry. So that's its maximum endurance. I keep on the West Coast. And so as you can see, I'm sending the Humphreys down here to run anti-sub work in and around San Diego. That's why this game takes a long time to set up, because I have taken every single destroyer individually and set up patrol zones outside of to the extent they have a low endurance, outside of Los Angeles, San Diego. And then I have more running out here further away so that I just have these interlocking webs of anti-sub. I have them around San Francisco, and that's also why I have nodes, because you don't have enough destroyers at the start to cover everything, but you can cover all of your nodes very well, both in close and a little further out. We also had submarines here. We have submarines with a very good endurance. These are the new kind of mode, more World War II like submarines, the cuttlefish and the tuna. I love the cuttlefish. That's like maybe my favorite ship in all of World War II, the SS Cuttlefish. It just sounds nasty, like it'll get after you. Um, anyway, but these ones with bigger endurance, I'm sending out to Pearl Harbor because we will send them then over into Japanese convoy lanes because they've got a big enough endurance to do it. But then we've also got some like the S-27, 28, 29. You got several of these with only a 4,000 endurance. Well, it doesn't make sense to send, they can't go in any kind of long range. So we send them way out, I say off the coast to do anti-sub, sub to sub stuff because a good Japanese player will get submarines in by San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's all about the endurances. Just look at and here's another one off of San Francisco, 4050. Now, never forget, if I go back to this, never forget, as I forgot, to set their max react to 1. Yep. Make sure they're on a max react 1. So, well, man, I missed 2 of these. Now, this one's another one of the more modern, newer submarines, the Nautilus. That's going out to Pearl Harbor. Okay. So you've got tanker. I mean, just look at all this cargo. I split up all of my local minesweepers. I make sure every single decent sized port in the game has a local minesweeper. You can also see, now this is what I said, 90% of them are going to Australia or Pearl Harbor, but then the capacity 1700 or 1000 ships that have that small capacity, I send up to places like Dutch Harbor, let's see, Cold Bay. You can see again, fairly low endurance, really low capacity, and I put them on continuous supply. They're going to go out to Alaska. This one's going to Kodiak over and over and over and over again. Now, the ones with the bigger endurance and the bigger capacity are going out to Pearl Harbor. We're going to load them up, CS Pearl Harbor, CS for supplies. They're just going to go back and forth the entire game. Bigger endurance, bigger capacity, CS Pearl Harbor, CS for supplies. I like to split them up into sizes of 3, no larger than 4. If we do get caught by a Japanese sub, I don't want him to be able to just have a turkey shoot. And that's part of the reason it takes me so long to set up as well. Now, here's a good example. We've got the Steel Importer, the Steel Navigator, the Steel Seafarer. They've almost got an endurance of 14,000, right? And they've also got a big capacity. We're going to do that CS Brisbane. They're going all the way out to Brisbane with supplies. They will do a tactical refuel. I'm not going to show you my exact lane. I'll just keep that to myself in case I end up playing one of you guys one of these times. I don't you say, oh, that's your lane. I can tell you there are three major lanes in this game that you're going to be going down and around and through. Uh, so anyway, they're heading down there, but they will. You see this tactical refuel? They're actually going to be refueling. If we go to the waypoints, I think I stop in Auckland. No, actually, this one I don't. I don't take it that far south. So they will do a tactical refuel because they can't make it there and back. You can see they're actually over 100 hexes away from being able to do that. But they'll come back to San Francisco, just a small tac refuel. I could also have them stop over in Auckland. Sometimes I'll do that. 13.6, 4,800. Now, these two could go all the way to Australia. I've just elected to have them go to Pearl Harbor instead, back and forth. These have a big endurance. I mean, they certainly could go with these guys. Now that I'm looking at it, I don't like to have, well, I may go back and change that and have them go off to Australia. Now, anything less than 5,000 capacity, you may end up burning more fuel than you actually get supplies over there. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'll do it with some of them, but not all of them. That's probably why I chose not to do it with all, and I'm just going to do it with these three. We've also got transports, 111th U.S. Space Force. This is going to Nomaya. We have the 34th Infantry going to Suva. I set all of these up. President Fillmore is just sitting here waiting, as President Fillmore was known to do. Henderson AP, he's just sitting here as well. We've got a couple of extra of transports. I have sent out anything that's not restricted to the West Coast, I've sent out into the Pacific, whether from San Francisco or LA. If we move up to Seattle, um, you'll see again a lot of transports, a lot of anti-sub stuff that I've set up. Here's more destroyers. I've got some off Prince Rupert, a lot of them outside of Seattle, Vancouver, because the Japanese AI at least loves to set submarines up here. I've got more here. They're all in their own patrol zones. Then we have a lot of tankers. Now, the thing to keep in mind, yeah, we do have 40,000 fuel in Seattle. But if you look at Vancouver, Vancouver has 289,000 fuel. Have Vancouver be your fuel depot up here on the northwestern coast, and have Seattle be your cargo depot. And so I've got all those tankers going to Vancouver, and then next turn I'll set them up to just do continuous supply to Pearl Harbor or otherwise. And so Seattle, Vancouver, I'm bringing everything to the coast, everything that I can. I've got troops coming out to Tillamook, Eureka, down the coast here. I've got some moving. Anything again that's not restricted to the West Coast is moving out into the Pacific somewhere. Usually Pago, Suva, Nomaya, Luganville, all of those names. I've got all. Well, we'll get to Australia in just a second. Prince Rupert is also very important. Make sure you get a lot of destroyer action out here, because eventually that will be pumping out a lot of fuel. In Australia, I move a lot of planes up to Australia because everything that's in the 11th USAAF is attached to the headquarters up here in Anchorage. And eventually, you can move that down to Seward along with the planes and run, anti-sub or recon or naval search as you will. Then eventually you can move them out of Australia as you start to push the Japanese back, and they can go along for the ride to the home islands. Hopefully, I move everything out to the coast here or to Anchorage. I love to build up Cold Bay, Dutch Harbor, and Adak. Those three. and Kodiak. I build all along. You've got enough stuff as the allied player that you can afford to do that. I also, make sure Juno's good. If Stanley's watching, don't worry, Stanley. I've got a transport headed to Sitka to get this base force and get it down to Cold Bay. Unlike our game against the AI, when I dilly dallied around with that. Okay, so I set all of that up. I set all of the islands up out here. Again, Pago. I've got a ton of stuff coming to Pago, to Suva, to Nomai. I know I've said that several times, but they're the important bases out here in the Pacific, the South Pacific. Uh, New Zealand has a lot of stuff. One thing I like to do is as you really start cranking supply in Australia. So in Australia, you're going to be bringing all of that fuel into Perth, or so from Cape Town to Perth, or from the US West Coast into Sydney and Brisbane. That produces just an enormous amount of supply. When that happens, I like to then move it out to Auckland and have Auckland resupply all of these islands out here that I want to keep. I'm going to build up Lord Howe in Norfolk. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say other than Suva is my big major base here. I will have aircraft crawling this place. I'm going to get 3 or 4 base forces in here, all with massive aviation support, so we can run, air all over the center part of the map here. Same with Nomaya, really, since it's very close to Australia. As we move up here, I've got a lot of forces moving over into Papua New Guinea, whether that be Moresby, Ley, Rabaul. I generally like to pull out a Kaveng. We'll see if I do this time. Um, because the Japanese like to land there, but they'll be coming after Rabaul. I like to get subs out here. I like to get whatever I can to prevent that. And as the game progresses, we'll talk more about that. Down the coast of Australia, what's important? Well, any of the bases over here are important because it's a potential landing spot for the Japanese. My main bases over here, I don't think are going to come as some kind of shock to you. They are Townsville, Brisbane, Sydney. I mean, those are the 3 major ones. Now, I will have stuff every other place, but Townsville is our main lifeline into Port Moresby and into Papua New Guinea. I've got a boatload, no pun intended, of troops coming to Townsville, Moresby, Ley. I've got things moving over to Buna and things coming into Rabaul. So we are gonna, fight it out here in New Britain and otherwise in the Solomon Sea. I've got all of that stuff coming over. I also do keep some defensive forces in each one of these. You don't want to give the Japanese a free landing. You want to make sure you're building your fortifications. In some places where I'm building the airports, in very few places do I build the ports. It takes a lot of supply to build ports, and honestly, you want to be doing the nodes and have your major ports. The rest of them, it's nice to have some secondary ports, but really you're going to be operating out of main ports. I take everything out of the center of the country and I move it to Darwin, to Townsville, to Brisbane, to Sydney, and in some cases Melbourne, although some stuff from Melbourne also heads to the East Coast. Just depends, you got to make sure you keep a nice force in Melbourne. I've seen Axis players land here and have a lot of success doing that because he can get on your rail lines from the West Coast over here and you're getting none of the fuel. So don't just abandon Melbourne because it seems like it's way down here. Set up Tasmania, of course, as well. I've set up all of Papua New Guinea, up into Darwin. Darwin, arguably one of the top 5 most important locations on the map. It's where you want to bring all of the Dutch equipment that you don't think you can, that's not going to help you mount an attack, or well, not really an attack, a defense against Japanese aggression in the Dutch East Indies. Or that Japanese aggression in the Dutch East Indies will defend from everything up along this coast, but especially Surabaya, Batavia, Oosthaven, Palembang. I'm going to be moving a lot of things to Palembang. I'm just going to. I'm going to defend it. Batavia, Surabaya, also very important. And then to Jilajap's important because you can run aircraft out of here and cover both Surabaya and Batavia. Celebus doesn't have a whole lot on it. You can see he's already moving down in here into the Malaccas, into Ternate. He'll probably land there. I'm getting everything out of here I don't need. I am keeping aircraft back at some of these smaller bases. Maybe we'll get a lucky shot. I'm also setting up major air bases at Koapang. I've got tenders coming down to Samlaki and to La Turn, and we'll try to build a wall right here at those three bases that stretch across Timor, the Timor Sea. And as he comes into the Banda Sea, hopefully we'll have a lot of aircraft before he can even think about Darwin. We will be all over him out here in the Timor Sea, whether it be from West or East Timor. East Timor, don't go there at night. Okay, Borneo Sarawak is fairly easy to set up. You try to get everything out of Balikpapan that you can, everything out of Tarakan that you can. You try to take as much fuel with you as you can. Same with all of these bases. Now, the Philippines, he's come in here very strong. I think I maybe have a nice little surprise for him in the Philippines. We shall see. We'll see if that play out next time. I've got counterattacks planned. I'm coming right after him. You're going to lose these forces anyway. If he lands with a fairly weak ass force like this, where it's light, pink counterattack, why not? You're not going to get these troops out of here anyway. You may as well try to knock him off the beach. If you can do that, you can slow him down a couple of weeks maybe. So just go after it. That's what I do in the Philippines anyway. Any aircraft that I could, I got out of here, including the B-17 Fortresses that did not get damaged. Some did, some didn't. The ones that didn't, I flew down to Darwin, and we'll eventually put them down in Melbourne or Sydney to train until the Americans, have a reason to use B-17 heavy bombers. I mean, we don't have any reason to even, well, I mean, I'd love to use them, but we don't have an escort that can go that far. We don't have any staging bases. So anyway, they're going to go train. I got them out of here. Any fighters I leave here, you may as well try to bloody his nose if you can. Over into Java, that's where I am right now. I've just made my way through Surabaya. I'm getting up to Batavia, and then I'll come back and recap that later today, hopefully, because I would really, really like to get this turned to him today. I've been, clipping along. I would say so far I'm at about the 12-hour mark of setting this game up, and I would say since I'm not into China yet, we're about halfway through. Uh, anyway, this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this game with two people that know how to play the game going at it. Going at it. He's already well on the move. It's going to be fun trying to get out of Singapore, trying to defend Malaya as long as we can, getting out of Singapore what we can, defending it with what we can. What's going to happen at Palembang and Batavia, Surabaya. I mean, those are all going to come under pressure before long. It will take me a while to set up China, as you see. Not to mention, I've still got Burma, India. Gosh, I got a long ways to go, but I'm going to try to get it done today. Anyway, this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. I will talk to you next time. Have a good one.